Welcome to Whatif tutorials. In this tutorial we'll be talking about machine overheads. Machine overheads include factory overheads directly related to a machine's activity, and it also includes factory-wide overheads which are not specific to any one machine but need to be allocated back over machines in order to get a full absorption rate per machine. We'll be having a look at how machine overheads appear in products. We'll then be creating an overhead set. An overhead set is a set of machine overhead rates covering all of the machines that need to be covered, and therefore all of the machines which are going to be included in the allocation of factory-wide overheads. Within each set we will be looking at the creation of machine rates themselves, and finally we'll be looking at the allocation of factory-wide overheads back over machines in a set. First of all, let's have a look at an item, a made item. Let's go to this one here and click Labour Overhead, and here we see the various labour operations which exist for this item. For every labour cost there will be an associated overhead cost. The overhead cost is expressed as overhead per unit, and this is derived from the total machine minutes, standard machine minutes, consisting of setup and run multiplied by the overhead rate per machine minute. Here we see the overhead rate per minute and then the overhead cost here, coming down to a total overhead cost per unit. And this is equal to the rate multiplied by the total machine minutes. While it's not shown here, it is the set machine minutes divided by the make quantity plus the run machine minutes, extended at the overhead rate per minute. Let's close this now. What I'd like to show you now is in the machine. Let's have a look at the machine labour and overhead. You see here there is a labour rate per minute and there is an overhead rate per minute and a reference to an overhead set. So each machine has a particular standard overhead machine rate per machine minute, and it is this that we are going to be calculating. So we click labour and overhead, we click machine overhead rates. This brings us to a screen showing the number of sets, or each set that has been created. An overhead set consists of one or more machines in it. If we look at this set here, we go here, we see that it consists of two machines. So those machines have a machine overhead rate consisting of specific overheads and an allocated portion to give a total overhead rate per hour or overhead rate per minute. What we're now going to do is to add another machine to this set. So we'll get a machine, we'll take this machine here, a new one, and add it to our overhead set, and then we will go into machine view overheads and edit. Now the first thing to do in creating the machine overhead rate is to determine the machine hours per annum. If we click this green arrow here, what we can do is we can add one or more machines that are actually involved in this machine, bearing in mind that a machine can refer to a group of machines. So MMJ12 may have in it two specific machines. What we want to do is to get a rate for the overall position, that is the two machines combined, but each machine may contribute different machine hours. So we'll call this MC1. First thing to do is to put in the available hours per annum, or excuse me, days per annum. These are days that it's going to be worked, then the number of shifts per day, number of hours per shift, and finally the efficiency. What we're endeavouring to arrive at here is the standard machine hours per annum, which is reduced by the efficiency from the available machine hours per annum. Click OK. So we've now added one machine. We can add the second machine, and here we may have 200 days, maybe 3 shifts a day, 8 hours a shift, and 95% efficiency. Okay, so we've got, excuse me, I'll just edit that, put in a description. Okay, now if we close that, what we see here is the total of those two machines, two specific machines, to give us at the bottom to give us standard machine hours per annum. This is the average efficiency. This is the total actual hours available. This is the average hours per shift, and this is the average shifts per day. Obviously, since we combined different shift patterns, we get that number. That's just for information purposes. Okay, the next thing is, having established our activity level, is to create our overhead costs. First part of the overhead cost equation is indirect people. Now here we can actually add specific people if they have been created as employees. Okay, or we can create groups of people, say 3, excuse me, not that, 3 and an average salary of that. Okay. Last one. Okay. So now we have 4 people at an average salary of 82,253 and a total base pay of that. We now can enter bonuses or allowances. An on-cost figure, which should cover things like workers' comp, superannuation. It doesn't cover annual leave or sick leave because that's included in the base pay. So it might be 20%. Okay, then motor vehicle costs, recruitment charges, and so on. I won't complete everything, just for now down here you can create extra cost classifications if you wish. So there's 3 of those, and then finally there's an all others where you can group several costs as others. So here we have $157,000 all others broken down into those other categories. Then of course you can add specific ones here if you want them highlighted. Okay, that'll do us at the moment. So we have now created $825,000 worth of overhead costs, which will be absorbed by MM12, the machine, which in fact consists of 2 individual machines. So we say OK. We come back here now, we can see the actual overhead items displayed across the top. Click for more. There's the 825,000 we just talked about. So at this point we've done the direct or specific overheads to the machine, but what we haven't done is we haven't allocated, or should I say reallocated, overheads, factory-wide overheads. You'll see here that they have been allocated to just the two machines there. By adding this machine here, we may spread the factory-wide overheads over the three machines. Now there's several ways to do that, but just to show you, we go into factory-wide overheads, and here they are. There's 2.5 million. Each of those can be allocated using separate methods, which I'll go into a little later in this session. But for the moment, let's say we do the allocation. Now it's spreading that 2.5 million over the three machines, and in fact our new machine has absorbed a big proportion of it because it's absorbing them basically on ours. So it's copying a lot. As I said a moment ago, there are several ways to allocate factory-wide overheads, which I'll cover shortly. But for now, we've calculated our rate as overhead $4.32 or $259 per standard machine hour. We can close that. If we go back into our labour and overhead machines, go to here, this machine, edited. Here we can see from overhead 4, that's now appearing. This is the rate we just calculated, and by default it has gone against the machine. Okay. Alright, the last thing I want to cover in this tutorial is the treatment of factory-wide overheads and their allocation. So let's go back into machine overhead rates, select our set, which we were just in, chairs, and up here let's have a look at what we've got. We've got allocation methods first of all. Let's go into them. There's 3 user-defined allocation methods. You can name these methods, method 1, method 2, method 3, you can give them any name you want. And effectively what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to specifically apply percentages to each of these machines. So if we take one, we'll put in 50% or 45% there, 20% there, and another 35% there. Method 2, if we want to use that as an alternative, could be 12, 40, and 48. And finally, method 3 could be 35, 30, and 35. Okay, so all we've done here is indicate methods 1, 2, and 3 and the percentages we want to apply. So having created those, we can go back into our factory-wide overheads, and dealing with indirect labour, for example, we can say this cost should be absorbed according to the indirect labour of each machine, or it should be absorbed in proportion to the total overhead of each machine, or in accordance with machine hours, or in accordance with one of these methods we just created, or none. So we've got a wide range of choices here, but since it's indirect labour, maybe we'll base that on the indirect labour. Let's look at another one just out of interest, depreciation. And with depreciation we might leave it at machine hours, and electricity maybe we'll go for method 1, and we might as well go up here with method 2. So you can, for each of the expenses of factory-wide overheads, you can select the method of allocation that you want. You can do the allocation. Right now, so these amounts have been reallocated, and under this method, this particular machine has copped far less share of the allocated overheads than was previously the case. If we go back into factory-wide overheads, we can view the allocation here. So there are our indirects and our other costs there to give a total. We can print that if we wish. We won't do that now. Okay, close that. So that, I think, explains how factory-wide overheads can be allocated over machine. Excuse me. So I'll close this now. Close that, and that completes this tutorial.